Hello, everyone, and welcome to the November 2024 episode of Voices of CFMA, Construction Financial Management Association's podcast featuring conversations with industry leaders, sponsored by Old Republic Surety. I'm your host, Sal Marino, CFMA's Director of Communications and an Assistant Editor for CFMA Building Profits magazine. This month, I am sitting down with Scott Damiecki from CohnReznick to chat about year-end planning, tax strategies, and a little bit of growth for 2025. Scott, thank you and welcome. Why don't you give everyone some background about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm the construction industry leader at CohnReznick, and we're a CPA and advisory firm. I specialize on assurance services, so audits and reviews of contractors as well as engineers and architects. But I also am fortunate to oversee a large team of folks that are dedicated to the construction industry. And we provide assurance and tax and advisory services to our clients. And then in addition, I serve currently on the executive committee of CFMA.
And how long have you been doing that?
Well, I stepped into the industry lead role earlier this year, but I've been working in the CPA profession my whole career, with the firm my whole career, and it's been
Wow.
26 years in total.
Awesome. Congratulations. And how'd you get
Thank you.
involved with CFMA?
Yeah, I mean, I joined the Greater Washington, D.C. chapter probably 20 years ago, when I just started, getting involved with networking, as a public accountant, and was just doing stuff at the local chapter for a number of years. Really liked it, liked the people. Got involved with a committee. Then that kind of, worked myself onto the board, and then ultimately became president of the chapter. I don't know, 2014, 2015 timeframe probably, and ended up doing that for 3 years as president.
Okay.
And then during that same time, got really involved with the Mid-Atlantic Regional Conference. And so I did that for a few years as well, as it moved around to different locations.
Right.
Served on various committees, programs and sponsors and all those fun things, and got a really good insight into, how conferences work and operate and venues and things of that nature. And so then I said, well, what's next? I started going to the national conference in 2015 and was just really impressed with, CFMA's national conference. And so I attended, a few years, and then, got to know Brian Summers really well. And I just said, hey, how do I get more involved at the national level? And he says, well, the conference program committee is a great place to start. So I think it was maybe 2019 or so. And at the time, I believe it was set to come to DC. And so they were also looking for a local representative, and I'm based in Maryland, just outside DC Metro. So they were like, hey, why don't you get involved with the committee? So I did that. Again, kind of worked my way up. I was asked to be vice chair, and that turned into, you turn into the chair. So the last 2 years, I actually chaired the conference. And so I was chair of those program committees, and just a great group of people. You form bonds with people and things like that. And so then the opportunity presented itself to then continue the evolution within CFMA and join the executive committee. So, and now it's, even got to meet additional people that I haven't known before through CFMA. But through it all, it's just more about the relationships with people that you make. And, it's just really good quality people within the organization. And, there's a lot of volunteers that volunteer their time for the initiatives of CFMA. And it's just a great group of people.
That's awesome. So for those who don't know, what does the conference program committee do?
Well, it basically reviews all the submissions of everyone that's looking to speak at the conference, and basically vets those sessions, and ultimately decides which sessions are actually have the ability to speak at the conference. And so it's pretty competitive. There's a lot of submissions. There's a lot of submissions to review. I'm a little biased, but I always tell everybody I think it's the hardest working committee in CFMA, because it basically, as soon as the conference ends, you might get a month off, and then the next you're starting to plan for the next one for the next year. And it's a good amount of time to review the sessions. And we have meetings basically every couple of weeks to discuss the sessions. And so hopefully people that attend the conference, they can see the value that committee brings, the quality of the content. And that's what I was so impressed with when I first went to a national conference. Just the quality of the content and the speakers is just, very impressive. So that's what the committee does, kind of works through and filters through those speakers and sessions and making sure that we're not having too many on one topic. And then it's also, trying to plot them into the grid of when they happen as well. The committee works on that as well. So, but it's really rewarding once you get to see it for yourself and be a part of it. It's a really great reward at the end of the day. We all kind of celebrate that, the success that the conference has had.
Oh, I can only imagine. Our annual conference is an event, and it's a fantastic event. If you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, or you haven't been in a while, definitely, I think this 2025 is going to be a fantastic year. So keep an eye out for registration links coming soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Scott, let me ask you, given your experience in the industry, is there something you look forward to, either personally or professionally, at the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I think year end for me, it's always time with family, is important, and obviously with busy season looming for us as public accountants, or early in the year, it's always an important time for us to spend with our families before that new year starts. But it's also it's kind of my favorite time of year because this is when we spend a lot of time with our clients. I mean, we talk to our clients throughout the year, but at the end of the year is really when I think we sit down with them. We talk about, how the first 9 or 10 months of the year have gone. We start really having discussions about the future and what does next year look like, and, a lot of planning opportunities, obviously, tax planning strategies, but also, looking forward, and we kick off a lot of our work, in this time period of year.
Right.
So
Yeah.
later in the year, we really start audit planning and things like that. So for us, it's kind of like a kickoff to the new year before the new year actually happens. So it's kind of like a fresh start for us, as CPAs. But it's great because you get to reconnect with your clients a lot of times. A lot of times we have in-person meetings. Get to hear about what's going on in their personal lives, but also professionally. And then, really try to strategize with them about what they're doing operationally, not just financial statements and tax returns, but how is their business operating, and how can we potentially help them continue to grow their business.
That's great. So, professionally, what are some best practices that you'd suggest for construction finance professionals to implement for the year end?
Yeah, I think the necessary evils, right? Or you got to get through your year end close, and you got to prepare for your audit or review and your tax work, right? And I think some of those things, I always checklists are very helpful. But what I'm, some of the best in class ones are, they do a close every month, right? And they have a really good process in place. And what I've always tried to tell clients is just try to replicate what you're doing every month, right? Don't make this year end close something bigger than it is. Now, obviously, you're going to have some additional steps that you're going to do for year end, but try to make it more of a habit. Do it every month, right? So when you close your December, it's just not that much different than your November or October close. And, it's timely. You kind of have a checklist of things that you do routinely. You have schedules and things like that you're updating, work papers and things like that. But again, I think it's also an opportunity for folks to kind of try to step back. And again, like I said about our discussions with them, is looking at their operations, right? Before year end close, right? So year end close happens in January or into February or whatever it is, depending on your organization. But before year end, really step back and say, hey, are we doing everything we can from an efficiency perspective, before you get into that year end close process, right? Before it gets too crazy. Because as soon as that happens, you kind of lose sight of the other things in your operations.
Excellent advice. What about trends? Do you notice any trends with your clients when it comes to year-end closings?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are getting better. I think you have to try to embrace technology. I think, as construction, I'm sure everyone will tell you, is a little bit slower to adapt and adopt new technologies. Um, but I think there's a lot of solutions out there that can help those efficiencies, right? And again, I think, I think about CFOs in general, controllers, the finance professionals in this business, they tend to wear a lot of hats, and it's you kind of have your day-to-day duties, but really you really have to have you got to set aside to step back and look at the bigger picture and look at more of operational performance, right? And goal settings and things that, you got to look strategically at things. And so sometimes, you're kind of busy with all your day-to-day duties that you just don't have time to do it. So, I think people should be looking at other things, technology investments, or, outsourcing certain functions of their duties so that they have the time to actually look at, strategies and strategic planning.
And, speaking of strategic planning, it can be both a science and an art. How do you suggest companies strike that balance between science and art to help them align with their own growth goals?
Yeah, it's difficult, right? I mean, I think budgets and forecasts, you try to be accurate as possible. I think you should always have, kind of another column that's like a stretch goal, or, something of that nature, right? So you have your maybe realistic budget that you can supply to people externally, but then maybe internally you have kind of those stretch goals of things that you're trying to do. And, again, I think you have to kind of look internally and externally. So you're looking at what internally can we gain from efficiencies if we don't grow our top line, right? So how do we grow our bottom line? But then, if you are trying to grow, are you trying to get into new markets? Are you trying to sell new services? Um, I think the one thing I would be, careful of is, a lot of contractors might see the money or chase the money, and, infrastructure dollars obviously are a big, thing you see every day. And there's real investments that's happening. But, if you haven't built an airport before, you shouldn't go bid on that airport project necessarily tomorrow. So, you have to stay in your lane. You have to be strategic. Not to say you can't get into a new line of business, but if you are, you need to bring in some other people that have that expertise in order to do so. But, I think you do need to step back, and, there's always the internal piece, which is usually efficiencies. And then externally, you just have to look at the market and see what's going on. And you do have to try to follow the dollars, because if your market is going to take a little bit of a dip, then you need to figure out a way to find where the money is in other markets that may do better.
And I'm curious too, CFMA has a number of tools like Confindex and Financial Benchmarker. In your experience, how are companies using these tools to get a strategic edge?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely tools, right? I mean, I think there's just another tool in their tool belts to utilize. They're great benchmarks of trying to compare what their company is doing to peer companies in the industry, and how do they stack up, right? I think when comparing them to your company, you can really hone in on some focus areas of saying, well, why are we better here, or why are we worse here, when we compare them to the metrics. And, I think it's valuable insight because it's industry data with your peer companies. And so you have to utilize that data, to your advantage, right? So I know we've used it. We've seen some value in it. We've used it to compare to, some of our clients. And for us, it's good. Again, it's just a good benchmark of, well, this is what's achievable, obviously, because other companies are doing it, and it's a good baseline. Obviously, if you're outperforming all those, then you're doing great, right? But I'm sure there's some areas for improvement that it could highlight for companies, and then they can, have some focus areas there, because you can't do everything. But, if you have a list of 5 things you're trying to achieve, then, maybe one of those is from the benchmarker.
Yeah, great. So, as the past chair of CFMA's conference program committee, I assume you've been deeply involved in the professional development side of things. How do you see leadership development evolving for finance professionals in our industry next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mentioned a little bit earlier, but technology, including, AI, I think is obviously, heavy focus is going to be on AI and the development of how that impacts our everyday lives and day-to-day businesses. And again, I think, the finance professionals that are wearing those five hats need to try to give that one of those hats to somebody else, so they can invest that time in AI, but also, the other side of the coin, which is the risks in cybersecurity, is also top of mind to me. But I think you have to be knowledgeable about those things. And so, a lot of finance professionals do have to develop and learn new skills potentially in those areas. Again, we're all kind of finance people, but the tech side is really going to change, I think, how we operate our businesses on a daily basis. And again, there's efficiencies to gain there, right? But at the same time, is there are all the risks out there. And I think, obviously, I always step back and look at the industry as a whole. I mean, workforce continues to be an issue. And so, even finance professionals, I think, have to be part of that solution and figuring out as a company, how do we operate? How do we recruit? How do we retain? There's a big safety component to that. You try to develop your employees, but also the aging workforce and even, the future leadership. And I think people need to start thinking about, well, how do we replace John over here that's been with the company for 30 years and he may be retiring in 5 years, and how do you replace those individuals and succession planning for the next generation. I think fortunately it's another hat that the finance professionals have to wear, but I think it's certainly important for the future of the company.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Scott, what do you get up to in your free time?
Well, I've coached my kids in sports for a number of years.
Nice.
Um,
How many
and I, and
kids?
I, so I have two daughters, they're 15 and 13. And so it's been basketball and soccer, and they play other various sports that I don't coach. But I actually, this past weekend was on my final game of coaching my daughter's soccer team. So I'm hanging up my coaching cleats and my
Wait, for
whistle.
this year or just for good?
Maybe for good, unless there's a need, unless there's a need somewhere. I mean, my oldest is in high school sports, and my youngest is an eighth grader and begin high school very very soon. So they're kind of moving on to bigger, better things than their dad coaching them. But I love doing that. I also, I mean, I'm a kind of a handyman as well. I love doing stuff around the house, and I guess construction kind of fits me really
Yeah, right.
well. I,
There you
I
go.
enjoy doing a lot of those tasks around my own house. I know better than trying to do it at somebody else's house, but I enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. So, are you like, if a pipe bursts, can you fix that?
Well, pipe burst may not be up my alley, but I've definitely done, a lot of other smaller projects, like the electrical type stuff, and we kind of renovated our garage a little bit, and I've got a nice work set up in my garage. So yeah, what I can do, but I also know my limits.
Right. That's the important
So
part, is knowing where
yeah,
you have to
well,
call
I
a
know.
professional.
You got to bring in the professionals, and because of what they do on a daily basis is definitely, I appreciate it as, them being clients of ours and seeing what they build every day. So yeah, it's important to know your limits.
Yeah, it really is. Well, Scott, what about personal or professional goals? You got anything for 2025?
Yeah, I think, personally, I want to travel more with my family. I've traveled a little bit for work and got to see some cool places and things like that. And so, and now I'm looking at it and saying, man, I gotta travel more with my family. So that's a personal goal of mine. Professionally, I think it's based on my role and my new role with the firm, and just kind of continuing the evolution of growing our construction practice, at CohnReznick, and growing in other markets that are expanding like Florida and Texas. And so, again, I got a great group of people that work with us, and just kind of continue that path along and, grow as our clients grow.
Awesome. All right. Well, anything else you want to say before we sign off on this episode?
No, I appreciate you having me. I know it took a little while to get on the calendar, but I appreciate hanging with me and sticking with me. And anybody that's listening, get more involved with CFMA. You do really receive more than you give. The more you give, the more you're going to receive. So, get involved in your local chapter, get involved at the national level. It's a great organization.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Scott, and thank you all for listening to another episode of Voices of CFMA, sponsored by Old Republic Surety. If you enjoyed this podcast, please don't forget to like and subscribe and share it on social media. And if you're interested in learning more about the Construction Financial Management Association, check out cfma.org. Once again, I'm your host, Sal Marino, and I will see everyone back here next month. Thanks.